Question 4.1 is there an orientation process that includes OH&S rights and critical health and safety information employees require prior to starting regular duties? So here you can see this question has 10 criteria. So what I always recommend again is that if you just copy and paste the exact criteria using the exact wording as they listed in the question into your policy. So for example, it could say that your company name has an orientation process that includes the following 10 criteria that employees are required to be familiar with prior to starting regular duties, and then just list the 10 criteria exactly as it is in the question. For question 4.2, are employees provided orientations within an appropriate time frame? Well, as an auditor, the only way they can really tell if they've got an orientation done within an appropriate time frame is if it has the hire date and the orientation date right on the orientation form. Otherwise, how can you tell, right? Okay, moving on to question 4.4. Does the company confirm appropriate health and safety qualifications are met before employees can perform their job? So the instructions say review training or verify training did occur before employees started to perform their jobs. So you're just looking at relevant training certificates and what kind of training occurred, and did that training occur before they started to do that kind of task. Question 4.5 asks, is there a process to assess the competency of new and reassigned workers? So here's where this idea of having completed competency assessments comes in. But read the instructions and note that there's actually two criteria to this question. So the question should really be, is there a process to assess the competency of new and reassigned workers at set intervals and refreshers when operational changes require it? So a possible answer could be that you insert, your company name. It has a process to assess the competency of new and reassigned workers at set intervals and refreshers when operational changes require it. And then you can see you're describing, like, for set intervals, what kind of training is that? And then for refreshers, what kind of training does that consist of as well? So you're describing a little bit of each one. For question 4.6, 4.7, and 4.9, those are self-explanatory. And for 4.9, I always use first aid training as a good example to use. For question 4.10, is there a system in place that encourages two-way communication between all levels of employees? So again, these audit questions, they're asking for very specific information. And if you look back at this question, it's asking basically, is there a system, one, that encourages two-way communication, and two, between all levels of employees? So as an example, you could say that the company has a policy and a system in place that encourages two-way communication between all levels of employees. For example, monthly safety meetings. And put something like that exact wording into your policy, because then it specifically answers the question. So for 4.14, 4.15, and 4.16, you can use the same training certificate for each of these questions. And this auditor always uses the Leadership for Safety Excellence as an example. And so, as an example, possible answers is the individual responsible for leading the field, formal hazard assessments or the inspections or the investigations has the LSE course certificate for the ACSA, and then you insert the date, month, and year of that training. Just note that the ACSA expects you to use different wording for each answer. So if the first question was answered as above, for the FHAs, then for inspections, you could write something like, for example, you say the month, day, and year is the date of the LSE certificate from the ACSA for the individual responsible for leading inspections. Or you could say the LSE certificate from the ACSA dated this date is the verification of training of the individual leading inspections or investigations, or whatever the example is. You just want to use different wording, and so that you're not copying and pasting or templating.